5.5 million years ago, Africa was a land of relentless heat, violent storms, and creatures that ruled with tooth and claw. Towering grasslands stretched as far as the eye could see, broken only by gnarled acacia trees and waterholes that were both lifelines and death traps. Herds of ancient antelope and primitive elephants gathered cautiously, aware that danger lurked in every shadow. Predators were unlike anything we know today. Saber-toothed cats, their fangs longer than a man's hand, prowled silently, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Gigantic crocodiles, armored like living tanks, lay hidden in muddy rivers, ready to drag unsuspecting prey below. Even the air was filled with menace. Vast flocks of predatory birds circled, their shadows sweeping across the plains. But perhaps the most terrifying fear of all was the silence before a hunt. Herds would suddenly freeze, sensing the unseen presence of a killer. Then chaos erupted. Thundering hooves, cries of panic, and the explosive charge of predators. The wilds were merciless. Life was fragile, every heartbeat borrowed from death itself. In this ancient wilderness, early ancestors of humankind began their struggle for survival. Small, fragile, and without fangs or claws, they relied on their wits. They scavenged from carcasses left behind by lions and saber-tooths, creeping in quickly before the beasts returned. Every venture carried immense risk, for the grass could hide death at any moment. At night, the African wilds grew more terrifying. The roars of predators echoed under a sky alive with stars, while fires sparked by storms lit the horizon. Our ancestors huddled together in fear, clinging to one another against the darkness. It was in these moments that the instinct to survive, and the courage to face overwhelming terror, was born. The African wilds, 5.5 million years ago, were not just a place of fear. They were a crucible. The constant struggle against predators, storms, and starvation shaped the resilience of life itself. Out of this terrifying world emerged the first sparks of intelligence, the first whispers of humanity, and the beginning of a story that would one day change the earth forever. Night fell across the African savanna like a suffocating shroud. The heat of the day gave way to a chilling wind, carrying with it the scent of blood, dust, and fear. For the early ancestors of humankind, small, ape-like creatures clinging to survival, darkness was the most terrifying enemy of all. With no fire to chase away predators, they huddled together in groups beneath low trees or within the shelter of rocks, their wide eyes glimmering with reflected starlight. Each crackle of grass, each distant roar, reminded them how fragile they were in this untamed wilderness. All around, the world pulsed with danger. In the distance, saber-toothed cats moved silently, their muscular bodies built for ambush. Hyenas with bone-crushing jaws prowled in packs, scavenging, stealing, and killing with ruthless efficiency. From the rivers rose the bellows of monstrous crocodiles, reptiles that had changed little for millions of years, their patience infinite as they waited for a single careless step. Even the sky held peril. Giant eagles with talons sharp enough to carry off a child scanned the open plains, their shadows blotting the moonlight whenever they passed overhead. To survive here required more than strength. It required cunning, and though they were small and weak compared to the beasts that surrounded them, our ancestors possessed something no predator could match, an intelligence that was beginning to awaken. By day, they ventured out cautiously, moving in groups across the tall grasses. They were scavengers first, not hunters. The kill of a saber-tooth was a banquet if one could be brave enough to steal from it. When the predators finished gorging and moved on, bones and scraps remained. With sharp-edged stones, our ancestors pried marrow from the remains, sucking out the rich fat that gave them strength. Every successful scavenging trip was both victory and gamble. If the predator returned too soon, death was certain. Yet hunger was more dangerous than fear. Still, survival was never easy. Waterholes, while essential for life, were death traps. Here, herds gathered in desperate numbers, their movements stirring up choking dust as they drank. Predators knew this and waited. Many an ancestor approached a waterhole cautiously, only to hear the sudden roar of a lion or the snap of a crocodile's jaws. Those who lived learned quickly: never drink alone, never linger long, and never ignore the silence. What separated these early humans from the beasts was not their size, nor their speed, but their growing ability to think, to plan, to remember. They began to recognize danger signs: the sudden flight of birds, the alarm calls of monkeys, the shifting silence of the grass. They learned to communicate with warning cries, gestures, and looks. Alone they were nothing. Together, they were something more. In the nights when storms lit the sky with lightning, a strange fear and fascination grew in them. Fire blazed across the grasslands, frightening animals and scattering predators. At first, they cowered from it. But slowly, across countless generations, something shifted. The glow of fire came to mean safety. When lightning set trees aflame, they crept closer after the danger passed, drawn to the warmth and the way predators kept their distance. Though they had not yet mastered it, fire became a silent promise of the future, a weapon far greater than teeth or claw. But before that future could arrive, survival remained a daily war. Mothers cradled their young tightly, their every instinct sharpened against the threat of losing them to the jaws of a predator. Fathers, or those who dared, ventured farther, seeking fruits, tubers, and insects to fill their bellies. They cracked open nuts with stones, pried termites from rotting wood, and dug roots with primitive tools made of sticks. Every discovery was precious, every bite a defense against starvation. Still, death stalked them. A child wandering too far from the group might vanish in the claws of a giant bird. A sick or wounded adult might fall behind, their cries silenced by the roar of a lion. The savannah allowed no weakness. Fear was constant, but it was fear that honed their survival. Out of this crucible of terror, patterns began to emerge, rituals of survival. They moved in groups not just by chance, but by choice. They chose vantage points where they could see danger coming. They remembered safe paths and dangerous ones. They began to pass this knowledge on, shaping the memory of their kind. The African wilds, merciless as they were, became the teacher that carved intelligence into their bones. And intelligence gave rise to something else, courage. When faced with a lone predator, an ancestor stood no chance. But when the group moved together, brandishing sticks, hurling stones, and shouting with guttural cries, even the mighty saber-tooth hesitated. For the first time, fear was not only theirs to endure, it could be inflicted upon others. It was a fragile advantage, easily broken, yet it hinted at the power humanity would one day hold. The nights grew no less terrifying. The cries of hyenas still sent shivers down their spines, and the earth still trembled beneath the charge of massive beasts. But in the huddled safety of their group, our ancestors discovered something far greater than strength. They discovered unity. Together, they could survive the darkness, and in the millennia that followed, these fragile beings would rise from prey to predator, from wanderers to builders, from fearful creatures of the night to masters of fire and stone. But in those distant nights, 5.5 million years ago, none of that was yet written. All they knew was fear, and the endless battle to see another sunrise. The African wilds were terrifying beyond imagination, but it was within that terror that humanity was forged. Every roar in the night, every shadow that passed overhead, every close escape from death etched lessons into their minds. Fear was the crucible, survival was the reward, and from those trembling beginnings, the story of humankind was set in motion.